Okay, well, welcome to the League of Women Voters of Amherst Charter Review Task Force. This is the third session in a series of three. Public discussions about the potential Amherst Home Charter Rule amendments that could be made, that might be made, that should be made, based on the League's good government principles.
You're advancing it, Rebecca.
Yeah, if I don't know why it won't. Uh-oh. Okay. Sorry. Okay. So the task force, a little bit about the background. During the League's 22 annual meeting, members voted to conduct this review of the charter in relation to our good government principles. And if you're curious about our principles and positions, you can go to our website and look on the About page. And down at the bottom, you'll see our different publications. And they're quite broad and quite thorough. So you can go through those. In 22 and 23, the Charter Review Task Force conducted a resident survey based on our principles, and they published the results, which are also available on the League of Women Voters website. So the task force concluded that many respondents were not fully satisfied with how the government is functioning, and they also found that among the 13 towns that use Amherst form of government, it is common practice to amend or change the charters by using different processes. And okay, oops. So this is the Amherst Charter's periodic review requirement. You can take a look at this. The town council shall provide in every year ending in a 4 for a review by a special committee, which they're in the process of setting up. And then they need to report within 1 year of recommending any changes. So we're right on time. These are our principles, which I'll let you just glance through. Good principles. Sorry, this is very touchy.
Rebecca?
Yes.
Would you please say that the principles are the broad rubrics that have several sections below each? I know you referred to our local program, local government, and I think it's important to emphasize that widespread and inclusive participation, as well as the next category, have several additional explanations, broad as they are, beneath each of those principles. So I don't want anyone going away thinking that these are just 7 broad statements.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm sorry for the interruption.
No, definitely check it out. These are just like they tried to condense pages of positions down to these seven ideas. But yes, you should definitely go on our website and find that PDF. So this is the Massachusetts law and charter change, the pathways to making changes. And somebody from the committee can chime in here if they want to. But there are several ways that changes can be made. Darcy, do you want to say anything about this?
Yeah, there have been questions about what things are within the scope of this this official charter review process. But there is a broad range of the types of amendments, revisions, and so on that can be made. And some might require, well, they all require legislative approval, but certain ones require the establishment of a charter commission or a special act of the legislature if they are big changes, but most of what we're talking about are changes that can be effectuated by this town council.
Okay, great. So the next steps, they've been studying this amazing committee has been studying these different options and legalities, and they've been meeting with different groups, the original charter commission members, sitting and former town council members. They're also going to observe the town charter review process and update the steering committee of the league on those developments. And they'll be collecting data, or they have been collecting data to make recommendations to the league membership, which will be happening on June 2nd. And I think there's a slide for that. So this is I don't understand what's going wrong here. That's very annoying. So on June 2nd, we're having a consensus meeting from 2 to 4 on Zoom to hear the recommendations of the charter task force. And we're hoping that a lot of members show up and weigh in, and hopefully we'll find consensus on amendments that the league would like the town council to make. And we can lobby for those if we do have consensus. Janet?
Yeah, well, these amendments will be mailed to league members to encourage them to review them carefully at home.
That's a good suggestion.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion, or at least emailed some sort of packet. And I know they're working on that, because not everybody has been coming to these sessions, and it would be good for people to do their homework before they come.
And not everybody reads their email.
Yes.
So I'm really encouraging that we put something in snail mail.
Okay, we'll take that into consideration. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Julian for question 1.
Hi, yes, thank you. My name's Julian. For those of you who don't know me, I'm one of the Charter Review Committee members, and our first question is, should public comment be provided at a minimum at the beginning of all regular town council and committee meetings? Currently, that is the case. Sometimes it's not at the beginning, but typically it is at the beginning of all council meetings, and I believe all committee meetings as well, at least most of them, but sometimes they hold it at the end or in the middle. It sort of varies in terms of the timing.
There we go. Rationale.
Yep, perfect. That's good. Thanks. The public has an interest in having a convenient time to give public comment to the council. Giving it at the beginning of meetings allows the public to know when public comment will come up on the agenda and allow people to schedule and plan their time around that. It also, at least not for committee meetings, but at the council meetings, is sort of a good time because it's not in the workday for most people, but it's not too late at night either, typically when the beginning of a council meeting is. Next slide. Over the past 5 years, the council has provided the opportunity for public comment at various times, as we've discussed, sometimes at the end, sometimes at the middle, typically at the beginning of council meetings in the current session. And then sometimes the town council president will put up public comment for a particular agenda item later in the meeting if there's a lot of demand or interest from the public. And when the agenda item comes up, they take public comment after the council discussion, but typically before the vote on the matter, if there is a vote. When comment is taken later in the meeting, residents have less incentive to give comments because there's not really a way of knowing when the agenda item will come up during very long meetings. Sometimes that can go late into the night, 10, 11 o'clock. So folks don't always stay for that long. Also, the committees of the council sometimes differ in terms of when they take public comment, and it doesn't always happen at the beginning of the meetings. The committees also have variability in terms of the timing of the meetings. Sometimes it's later at night, sometimes it's on work days and the work day, etc. So that's worth noting as well. Perfect. I got it. Taking public comment at the beginning of the meetings on any topic within the jurisdiction of the council or committee encourages more public participation.
Actually, could we have a negative statement indicating that having public comment very late in the meeting is a disincentive to participation?
No,
Yeah, that's certainly another point there. Do we want to go and take comments? Anybody have comments, questions?
Yeah, because people need to know I'm going to come at 6:30 and I'm going to say my piece and let them talk about all the things. You know, it's been hit or miss, and a number of people have been very disturbed by it.
Yeah, so I'll just chime in before I start taking hands that I see, which is the goal is for each topic to take about 15 minutes, and then for everybody to have a chance to ask questions, comments, etc., and try to keep those questions or comments under 3 minutes. So I will start my timer when someone starts talking, similar to council meetings, and you will have 3 minutes, and I'll politely cut you off if you go over that. I think we are allowing people to talk twice, but I could be wrong. You can also always put your comments and stuff in the chat as you'd like to. That is, we can also see it there. And then we don't want to get into too much of a back and forth discussion, but a little bit is okay. So I will start with Martha.
thank you. I have two comments here. First, for town council meetings, it is very helpful to have a general public comment session at the beginning for the reasons you said, that it's at least earlier in the evening, it's at a set time that everybody knows. But then for both committee meetings and for town council meetings, it is very helpful to have a public comment time after an item is discussed. And so I think in town council meetings that happens occasionally, but anybody who really does have a concern and wants to speak to a particular topic, well, they do need to just stay and listen to what the councilors are saying about the topic and then have the opportunity to respond and make a comment. And for committee meetings, which are generally shorter, don't drag on till midnight, then I think as long as the time of public comments is stated clearly in the agenda, then I think that it should be flexible. And again, I think it's really important to have a public comment time after the committee members have discussed a particular item. Then the comments can be much more relevant and specific and really more useful than having to make a general comment at the beginning when you don't know what's really going to be discussed. So I would suggest some flexible wording. As I say, I have agree that comments should be at the beginning of town council meeting, at least as a minimum. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Martha. Adrian, Terezi?
Yeah, thank you. My question is more in terms of process for this next hour and a half. So I ask, are you entertaining, as the charter review group, entertaining questions or comments after each question that you pose? And if so, can you give me a breakdown in terms of your intent to spend half on Article 8 and half on Article 10? I would just like some kind of an organizational structure so I know.
Yeah, of course. No, that makes sense. So I think the idea is that we spend 15 minutes sort of per topic. I know we waited to start until like 2:10 maybe, so we still have 1 minute left technically. But the idea is to then allow people to comment at the end of each question. So I think we have 6 questions in total. And the idea is to take comments at the end of each question up to about 3 minutes per person until folks have exhausted their questions or comments.
That's helpful. Thank you, Julian.
Absolutely. iPad?
Phyllis Lehrer.
Hi, Phyllis. Go
The
ahead.
thing is, the ZBA is a little different when you're talking about participation, because after each hearing, they allow the public to speak, and that's sort of built into their meetings. However, it's not built into the other meetings. And I agree with Martha. It's important for people to speak after an issue gets discussed. So before a council makes a decision, it can hear the information that's relevant and important. Thank you.
Thanks. Michael Greenbaum?
I would like to suggest that in addition to the location of the public participation, there be a change that would allow counselors to ask questions of the public if they are interested. I think there's something very frustrating about making a comment and then not knowing whether it's just blowing in the wind or whether anybody is interested in it. But if there could be a minimal amount of reaction or interaction from the counselors to the public who are asking or making the statements, I think that would be very useful and would encourage people to participate.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Adrian?
You're muted, Adrian.
How's that?
Good.
Thank you, Julian. I see that you're up to question 2, and really my comments would be for question 1, and I certainly affirm what Michael's saying. I would like to extend it a little bit and say this, that meaningful public participation is not by virtue of the public comments as we have, whether they're the beginning, the middle, or the end. And certainly I value the other statements made about public comment, but they don't go anywhere, not to the satisfaction. And since our public participation has been reduced, both in terms of the committees of the council, which are all, I believe, advisory, so public participation is limited in other parts of our charter, that the public participation is really a communication quagmire, both for the public as well as for the council, who is motivated by this charter to allow the president to set a number of minutes for this public comment, either written or presented verbally, and it goes nowhere, and we don't know we don't know that it satisfies anything. So those are my comments. I don't like the system. I don't think it serves the council, the town council, as a governing body, nor does it serve those residents who would like a little bit more communication to take place outside of council meetings, committee meetings, and public hearings. Thank you for taking those comments.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody else before we move on to the next question? Seeing none. Darcy?
I think that's you again, Julie.
This is me as well. Okay. Whoops. So question 2 is, should the town be requiring that virtual meetings continue and remote meetings be allowed for counselors as long as they're allowed by state law? So basically, currently, they have remote sort of hybrid meetings, sometimes remote, sometimes in person, and both. And that's allowed by state law as a result of the COVID pandemic. And then currently the state may get rid of that. They may not. So it may sort of force the hands of the town. But until that point, this is sort of an issue or a question. The town
Can I just
council rules.
clarify slightly, Julian? This is a little confusing because one question is, should we continue the public's access to virtual meetings? And the other issue is the state law only has to do with counselors, whether counselors can easily participate remotely without offending the open meeting law. And so they are two separate issues, but they're related.
Sounds good. Thank you. So section 2.6 of the rules of procedure in the town council has the town council shall adopt rules regulating the procedures of the town council, which shall include but not be limited to the following. Were you going to add something here? Maybe. Anyway, next slide.
No, that was just a proposed amendment.
Got it. Sounds good. So next slide, we have the rationale for the amendment, which is League of Women Voters principles apply in public participation here. The virtual meetings have encouraged much more attendance and participation. And the town room only accommodates 40 in-person attendees. I'm not sure if that's including counselors or not, but that's sort of the capacity limit for the town room. Sometimes I know the town council has moved it to the middle school or to another location if they plan to have more people in person, but virtual meetings can mitigate that issue and also allow for people, if they want to attend, say someone is on vacation or is driving or is working on something else and sort of wants to multitask and listen to the meeting. It allows for more public participation there, like counselors who may be ill, childcare, that sort of thing. And it also would allow the same sort of freedoms that it gives to the public for counselors as well. And if someone is considering running for town council who has young kids or whatever, they may consider that. So next one here, council experience. Town room in the town hall can hold 40 people. We've discussed that. And then we've discussed how they've continued, the council has continued to have hybrid meetings, board and committee meetings, and those have continued to meet virtually, like the Community Resources Committee or the Finance Committee generally meet virtually because of the ease and convenience. The town uses the Zoom meeting platform like what we're using now, and residents can also access the meetings on Amherst Media if they have a TV or on YouTube through their phone or computer at the library or whatever. So the state has so far allowed municipalities to continue these meetings. They may cut us off, in which we don't really have a choice. But until that point, we do. So yeah. Best practices here. There have been several council discussions and votes regarding whether to go hybrid, in-person, virtual meetings. There's been some disagreement between different councilors on the value of having these virtual options. And to remove unnecessary uncertainty regarding the future of this practice, enshrined in the charter the requirement of hybrid council meetings and virtual meetings for all other council and town manager committees to encourage more resident access, more residents to run for office, more residents to get involved with boards or committees, that sort of thing, in addition to just recognizing here that we may enshrine this in the charter and then have ourselves cut off by the state, if that makes any sense. So yeah, I will open it up to questions. I'll stay on that slide so it doesn't confuse people. Any questions, comments? Michael, I saw your hand go up.
It's not exactly a question. I'm trying to imagine the arguments against this, because this seems to me to be such an important way that relatively recently became available to us. I mean, to allow greater participation and understanding of town governance. So I'm strongly supportive of not only continuing this practice, but encouraging it and letting people know of the various ways that they can not only observe, but participate town meetings. And I would say the same is for the other committees in town as well.
Yeah, thank you. Janet?
Yeah, well, having been part of this. I just want to be very clear. If you see the league position, we are very clear on this. Widespread and inclusive participation includes being part of the process, creates understanding and ownership of decisions. Expressions of various opinions promotes a sense of inclusion. Hearing of diverse points of view encourages involvement. Those are all part of our position. So it would be very clear that we are encouraging all of this by virtue of a position that we developed in 2003.
Thank you, Janet. Perfect.
When there, done that.
Yeah, thank you. Lynn Gracmer?
Yes. First of all, this is something that we've continued to promote in our conversations with Senator Comerford and Mindy Dahm, and I urge you to continue to be in conversation with them, letting them know you support the continuation of this. We are getting a serious sense that there are a lot of legislators that do support the continuation of virtual participation, but it always is a good idea to let our legislators know how you feel.
Yeah, thank you. Any other comments, questions? I'm not seeing any. Okay, I guess we'll move on to question 3. Darcy, is this you?
Yeah, I can take this one.
Great.
The question 3 is, should electronic signatures be allowed for all resident petitions? Can you move that forward? The relevant charter sections are the public participation mechanism sections in section 8 of the charter, initiative measures, and voter veto procedures. So, next slide. So the league rationale for a possible charter amendment here is increased public participation. And as with virtual meetings, access to charter petition signing via electronic means provides more access to residents and are verifiable through various means that I can't completely explain. Next. So we're not talking about just online signatures, like people might sign an online petition by just typing in their name. This is a process of a legal process of electronic signatures that requires the signer to submit various forms of identification, and it's verifiable. So it's somewhat complex way of signing something. So the council experience has been that the council did expand one section through its rules. The section 8.1 is a public participation mechanism called open meeting of residents. And the council opted to change one of its rules and its rules of procedure to allow electronic signatures for the signing of that type of petition in 8.1. So basically, it was accepting that form of signature. And so the question is, why not extend it to 8.3 and 8.4, which currently only can have signatures that are physically signed. So next slide. basically, we're just saying that our council itself has initiated on its own the use of electronic signatures makes sense and seems fair and democratic to extend it to all of the resident participant mechanisms. So, Adrian.
Oh, I was so strongly in favor of it. In fact, when this rule came into the town council, I was wondering if the counselor who made the motion and the acceptance of it, it was indeed a league member, because this is straight out of what the league's good government principles is all about. And I'll just piggyback on what Janet Shevin said earlier and repeat that, yes, it goes into our good government principles. So a strong, absolute yes.
Thank you. Michael?
Well, I'm just a little bit confused. I'm very much in favor of it, but is this committee dealing both with the rules of procedure as well as the charter itself? Because if the council can do this as a rule of procedure, then the charter doesn't have to be changed. Is that right? I mean, the charter would allow this.
Yeah.
If it allowed that change to take place in that one area, the charter need not be amended. Is that my understanding correct, or am I wrong?
I think that the charter speaks to what kinds of signatures are required. It doesn't limit them for the 8.1 signatures. It doesn't say written signatures for 8.1. It doesn't really say anything. So I think it would have to be changed in the charter I don't think the rules could amend 8.3 and 8.4. So yes, to answer your question, Michael. Phyllis? Is that Phyllis?
I agree with Adrian and Janet.
Okay. Janet.
Other Janet, if I recall, the charter has different language for 8.3 and 8.4, and they specify a physical signature verified by the town clerk against the electoral rolls. Because
Thank you.
The 8.1 and 8.2, the universe is town residents, and 8.3 and 8.4, the universe is registered voters. And I do not know what requirements the state may have in terms of what is permissible for when you're dealing with something that has a electoral significance.
Thank you for the clarification.
It's a great question.
Okay. Any other comments or questions on this one? Okay, next question. We had another one of our members who wasn't able to make it doing this question today, but I will cover for her. And the question is, should a voter veto resident petition under that 8.4 require the same affirmative vote percentage as the original council vote being challenged in order to pass?
State law.
In other words, if the original vote required a majority of the council to pass it, and there's a group that wants to challenge that vote, do they also require a majority? If the original vote required 2/3 vote of the council, should the vote of required to challenge it require a 2/3 affirmative vote to overcome the challenge. So let me go through the rationale first, Janet, and then we'll call on people. Next slide. So the relevant charter section is 8.4. It says, if a majority of the votes cast on the question is in the affirmative, or if 20% voter participation requirement is not met, the measure, meaning the measure that's being challenged, as originally approved by the town council, shall be effective immediately following the election at which voters considered the measure. So it's based on, regardless of what type of vote was taken originally, the charter requires only a majority of the votes of the public to vote affirmatively to uphold the original vote. Next slide. So rationale for possibly amending it based on participation, again, widespread and inclusive participation. So presumably voter veto positions are undertaken when a substantial number of public disagree with a vote taken by the council. For that participation mechanism to be meaningful and democratic, it should require those supporting the vote to show that the same percentage of voters support the council's vote as was required by the council. For example, if the council vote required a 2/3 supermajority, then 2/3 of the voters would need to vote in the affirmative for the measure to pass, to affirm the original vote. So this is the argument that might be made if we're trying to amend the charter in this direction. Next slide. So our experience that many of us are familiar with, a voter veto petition under section 8.4 of the charter was brought to challenge the April 5th, 2021 council vote approving borrowing to fund the expansion and renovation of the Jones Library. The council vote required 2/3 of the council to vote in favor. The townwide ballot required as a result of that voter veto position garnered a majority, but not a 2/3 vote of the votes cast. And state law requires that municipal votes on borrowing authorizations require a 2/3 vote of the full legislative body. So next slide is just, the only thing we have on this slide is that making the public participation mechanisms as meaningful and workable as possible is a goal. So comments. Janet.
Yeah, I'm taken aback by this because it hadn't even occurred to me that the vote was only majority on the populace, whereas it had required 2/3 from council. But the whole mechanism on having voter veto participation is something that does not occur very frequently and needs a good deal of clarification. And I'm not sure that this is enough. I mean, step-by-step clarification, because, for example, as I recall, it is not easy to get a matter on the ballot by voter petition.
Right.
And so the whole thing has to almost begin with getting something on the ballot. This whole process needs a lot of step-by-step clarification is what I'm suggesting. And I'm not the person to create it, but I'm the person who's in a fog.
So you're saying that the question that we are proposing needs more clarification, or that the
process.
process. yeah, it's pretty well, it's very detailed process that's in the charter. But the one piece of it that we're potentially targeting is the quantum of votes required
Okay,
for an overturn of an initial vote. Michael?
Well, I have my doubts about this, I must say, and maybe it's lack of understanding, but I think it's a very complicated thing. I mean, if we had stronger checks and balances in our governance, it would
Yes.
perhaps require one vote, that of an executive, to exercise a veto, but then the council would have another chance either to reintroduce or modify its original position, and the issue would not be dead. I don't think I would support moving to a 2/3 voter position, because there's much difference between getting 9 votes and getting 2/3 of a public vote, because with those 9 votes, you've been able to have the discussion among the councilors. We have a sense of where people stand. I think a voter situation, a voter veto situation, even under this charter, is totally different. And right now, I would be inclined not to support this idea, but I'd really want to think about it some more.
yeah.
It is confusing, I will give you that. Adrian?
Yes, thank you. It's confusing. And in fact, when I looked at 8.4, just a little prior to the meeting, I recalled during these charter discussions back in 2017, those were the least clear of the charter discussions with the council that that charter review committee had. I wasn't clear then. I have to admit, I am not clear now on 8.4. I don't think there was, forget about consensus on the charter document. I'm not talking about that, but there was discussion, if I recall correctly, all over the place. So I'm going to ask you, Darcy, and the other charter review people, and I do know that you went back and looked at some of those meetings. Can you provide a little bit of background as to how these percentages came in? Was it strictly because of state law that governed this 8.4 section of the charter? Just a little information, if you have it.
Yeah, I know that the Charter Commission changed their position on this pretty late in the process.
But I'm
I-
not sure that they changed their position on that particular issue. They did want to clarify things, but it was very unclear as to what direction they were clarifying them.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Yeah, I would have to look again to make sure. I think that it's tricky because a lot of times that there are anti-tax factions in towns who just want to prevent any spending for any reason. And so that may be a reason why there is a sense that you don't want to give the public the ability to prevent all projects, because some members of the public would just vote against everything. But it is a mechanism that's put in place to protect, protect residents who object to a vote of the council. So having a higher voter quantum is protecting those who are working to overturn a decision of the council based on thinking that the residents, there's more feeling that the residents oppose something that the council has done. And it's not always, it wouldn't always be a 2/3 vote. It would be whatever quantum vote was required by the council. But I hear what you're saying. And we have not taken a position on any of these as far as what we're going to recommend. We're just wanting to get input from all of you.
So my input is it is very thorny, as you've identified, Darcy, and I urge a deeper dive into this by the League Charter Review Committee. I know I certainly could use a little bit more understanding of this whole thing and what you mean by meaningful and by what you're presenting here as a possible recommendation. Thank you.
Me too.
All right. Anything else on this? Okay. It's almost 3. Let's move on to I think what's the last one? Is Andy still here? Yes, good.
Is this Article 10 now? Are we moving? Oh, yes. Are we moving to Article 10?
Yes.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Um,
I have my charter review. I have my charter right in front of me. It's really, really important to guide some of us as you move along, Darcy. Okay, thank you.
yes.
Article 10, page 30.
So this is the last question, and it includes a number of different items that were in the transition section of the charter, section 10. And so our question, and a lot of these items were added to the charter, I think, to sweeten the pot.
Mhm.
And we haven't had much luck in getting them implemented. So the question is, should the charter recommit to the 5
I
programs?
think, Darcy, I thought I had this in the email.
Oh, okay. All right, go ahead.
No problem. Thank you. Yeah, so the question here, question 5 is, should the charter recommit to the 5 programs that they committed to pursue in the original charter? Those were ranked choice voting, which we've seen some movement on. I believe it's been put forward to the legislator. Participatory budgeting, which we've seen limited to almost no movement on. Creating a position of Americans with Disabilities Act coordinator, which I believe we do have, but it is someone who wears many hats in town. That is not their sole job. Permitting non-citizens to vote in town elections and to seek and hold elected office. I'm not actually sure what the status of that is. And lowering the voting age for town elections, which I do not believe we've made any progress on. I know Deerfield recently rejected it and Sunderland approved it, I believe. So there's some of our neighbors who are making some actions on that. So yeah, next slide. Section 10.1, creation of ranked choice voting commission to propose the measure to the town council by September 1st, 2020. Section 10.11, creation of a participatory budgeting commission to propose a measure to the town council by December 1, 2020. Section 10.12, topics for study, creating position of American Disabilities Act coordinator and permitting non-citizens to vote in town elections and hold elected office, and then lowering the voting age for town elections. So rationale for possible amendment certainly includes League of Women Voters principles of public participation, increasing public participation, widespread inclusion, and diversity in town government in terms of who is represented and has a voice.
Some of this has been prevented by this because the state legislature has not come back with permission for it, particularly ranked choice voting.
Yep, that is correct. We will get to questions and comments in a minute, but you are absolutely right. Ranked choice voting commission appointed by the council, reported back in 2019, and we've been awaiting state legislative action since 2019. So it's been 5 years now. And faster routes than that have been suggested by the commissioner that we could have taken, but we've not taken those. For participatory budgeting, the report that was written in June 2021, the commission short-term proposal was sort of rejected from the council and the manager, saying that it was the wrong time for new expenditures during the COVID-19 pandemic. And instead, the commission explored participation in existing town programs, which include Community Preservation Act, where there is some lens of public participation, Joint Capital Planning Committee, where we have resident proposals, and community development block grants. All of these allow residents to propose things, bring things forward, but none of them allow residents to have a say as much, aside from regular public comment, in proposed measures that have been brought up by department heads or by the town as to whether they support them, don't support them, etc. And they don't really have a vote. I think that's only decided by councilors and those in the different processes. So the commission long-term proposal was to continue exploring participatory budgeting. We've now pretty well moved past the COVID-19 pandemic. And in 2024, we haven't seen any other action on this year or last year. So then C is creating a position of Americans with Disabilities Act coordinator. And this was given to as one of the many tasks that the DEI director, Pamela Nolan-Young, was tasked with. So she is currently the Americans with Disabilities Act coordinator. And permitting non-citizens to vote in town election and seek and hold town elective office. Town meeting, back when we had town meeting, voted to seek a special act of the state legislator. And the charter for the new form of government included continuation of the effort in a bylaw proposal in 2023. So then lastly, lowering the age for town elections. So in the opinion of KP Law, the town was unlikely to be successful in seeking this. And Sunderland actually has just passed this, so they have put it forward. Deerfield rejected it, and Conway, Whately, and Lexington are all discussing it at their Springtown meeting. So I don't know if they also have KP Law or have a different legal service that recommended something different, but Sunderland has already had success in this. They're bringing it forward to the state legislature. We'll see what the state legislature does. And many of our neighboring communities have chosen to sort of push forward with this diversity effort. And Boston actually already approved it in November of 2023. So it was approved by the biggest city in Massachusetts, biggest city council. So we'll see what the legislature does with that. But I would sort of, I guess my personal views, not speaking as a member, I would question the opinion of KP Laws and the accuracy of it, given that these other towns have moved forward. So anyway, that is pretty much the end of our presentation. The Charter Commission saw all these initiatives as valuable to pursue and include in the charter. And then this is our final comment, so I will hold off on that and get questions, comments, and ideas from folks. I will start with Michael Greenbaum.
The ones I feel passionate about and strongly about are D and E, the non-citizens being able to vote in town elections and lowering the voting age to 16. I mean, I think these ideas have come and in a sense gone because we're so accustomed to having these things not achieve anything in the state legislature, that I think we need to talk more seriously about how we can word these things so that the state will accept them. I think they're both vital to democracy, and particularly to a town like Amherst, where we have so many non-citizens who are permanent residents of the town and who we need to be able to use their wisdom and their willingness to participate. And we have every indication that high school students are valuable and thoughtful participants in political matters. So I feel strongly about those. I feel less strongly about the voting, because I think unless people really understand it, it's never going to be as successful as in theory it ought to be. And participatory budgeting, I have no strong thoughts about, and I don't understand why staff positions are up for under this discussion anyway. But D and E, I feel very strongly about. Thank you.
Are you there, Julian?
Yeah, sorry about that. I'll let Rebecca, you have a quick clarifying or an opinion on this?
Well, I just wanted everyone to know that Representative Mindy Dom has joined us, and so we can certainly ask her questions. Maybe Julian, could you stop screen sharing, and then we can all see each other again. There we go.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for pointing that out, Rebecca.
Yeah.
Dom, do you have anything you'd like to include here?
I'm here at your invitation, Julian, so you should tell me what you want me to say. I've been here listening to the conversation that preceded this around the resident vetoes, which I found interesting as a resident of Amherst. So
Great, thank you.
I can certainly, I'm going to put a status of the home rules that are currently sitting in the legislature for Amherst in the chat. I'm happy to talk about any of them. You'll see that I have not received a home rule on lowering the voting age this session.
Yeah.
I would actually welcome that. And I think there's a statewide effort to try to do that. But this issue was brought to my attention during my first campaign, and I'd be happy to advocate for a lower voting age in local elections. But you'll see that I'm sorry to tell Michael, since he said it was of importance to him, but the home rule on providing non-citizen voting was put to study. And I think it's likely, quite honestly, that it will be put to study again, although maybe a different president might actually change the urgency of that. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't be filing it. I think that legislation, even the stuff that gets passed, sometimes takes a long time. So filing it has a strategic value.
Thank you. I think that's right.
And you can see the ranked choice voting has been extended to the end of May, and the housing transfer fee till the end of July. And I can say a little bit about both of those, and then I'm open to any thoughts or questions. The local real estate transfer fee, I think, has been put off not to kill it, but to see how it plays out in the housing bond. As many of you may know, we are considering a big housing bond probably later this month. And in the governor's proposal, she's put a statewide housing transfer fee. Amherst has a local one. Several other communities have local ones, and Senator Comerford actually has what's called enabling legislation, which basically allows localities to do something they would normally have to ask for a home rule for, but lets them do it without asking for the home rule. So she has a statewide local housing transfer fee. The one that the governor put in her bond would not help a town like Amherst. The market is set too high. It's set for places like Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard, where the sales are really exorbitant. And so the floor for that in the bond is too high for Western Mass. Many of us are asking for the floor to be lowered and for it to be included in the bond. And we'll see. But I think that's why Amherst's housing transfer fee and other communities have been sort of extended, not put to study, but postponed to see how that debate unfolds with the housing bond. So that's one piece. Ranked choice voting, I'm glad it was like only extended until the end of this month because it gives us more opportunity to sort of pull it out of committee earlier than it was last time. And I really want to stress this. I sort of take exception when people say nothing has happened to ranked choice voting. That's not true. First of all, we file it along with several other localities who are also looking to get local ranked choice voting. So again, we're keeping it in the news. We're also able to present new arguments for it. Like the state may be reluctant to do it on a statewide basis because the ballot failed on a statewide basis, but in our community, it didn't fail. So I'm able to sort of articulate why we should have a local carve out. But last session, even though it was too late to do anything, it advanced. And I just really want to stress to you that in the world of the Massachusetts legislature, precedent has some weight. And so when a bill has passed or advanced to the next committee in the previous session, usually it bodes well for the next time it comes around. So, and by bode well, I mean just at least make that minimum next step, that minimum progress. So I'm still working with the chair of that committee. It's the same chair as it was last session to indicate Amherst's interest in this, and we'll continue. If I can say one thing, though, about your deliberations around the charter, my recommendation would be if the Charter Commission wants to pursue including ranked choice voting in charter revisions, that it be much more directive about what it expects to see. So like in the first charter, it set up a commission to come up with a measure or a way to do ranked choice voting, and then said the council should take action on that within 90 days. Maybe since that's happened, the next charter should say something like the town of Amherst will implement the recommendations of the commission for its voting. And then obviously, I mean, I realize Amherst can't do that without a home rule, but that also gives the home rule a little bit more like our charter is demanding this. So if we're able to get the charter approved, which I would suspect we would, then we could make an argument that it includes this mandate. But I also suggest that you look at what East Hampton produced, and I can provide it to you. The home rule that East Hampton used for ranked choice voting, because that did get advanced. And so that would be my two pieces of advice. Look at both of those things. Should you put a more directive piece in the charter, or should the next home rule basically mirror what East Hampton did in terms of, you know, like looking at what do we have to do to adapt it? Because I think they have a mayor, so it's a little bit different. But what do we have to do to adapt it? I see that Andy's written in the chat that says shall adopt. Shall adopt does not mean shall implement. I really want to be clear. I think that we have to be in the charter extremely directive that voters want, if we decide to go the route of making sure that the charter says Amherst should use ranked choice voting, we need to do that, because adopting the measure is quite, you know, the commission came out with lots of different parts of the measure, right? They came out with the major public education campaign. They came out with a way to do it. They talked about the complications in it, but there's a way to be a little bit more directive. And then at the same time, I'm kind of contradicting myself, because I'm also saying, look at what East Hampton did. The home rule is easier to carry in a sense. If we say to the legislature, you've already approved this home rule for East Hampton,
Right.
The home rule for Amherst is similar for our form of government. So I guess I'm open to any questions or comments. Just wanted to bring, and I put the update on the 3 home rules that we have in the chat. And as many of you know, the town council passes a request for a home rule. It's a legal document. They give it to us, meaning the state legislators. State rep takes the lead, meaning that I bring it to House Counsel. They review it to make sure the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed, and that it's legal. And then it gets filed by me in the House. Senator Comerford and I are partners in everything when it comes to Amherst. And so she also kind of carries it in the Senate and sort of flags it for the Senate as well. But the House takes action first in filing.
Got it. Thank you so much, Mindy. I appreciate your little spiel there. Rebecca, do you want me to moderate this discussion or would you like to?
I've been trying to ask a question, please. My hand's been up for quite.
Go right ahead. Yeah.
Okay. Well, actually, because I really want to put this question to Mindy. Mindy, more than 10 years ago, I was in town meeting when we voted to ask the state legislature to enable non-citizens to vote in Amherst elections. And I'm curious to know what is happening in the legislature. Is there some sentiments against non-citizens? Has it not been proposed properly? What has delayed it? I mean, for me, it's more than 10 years that we've been asking for it.
So I think that to help things move in the legislature when it concerns policy changes like this, it really helps to have a statewide movement or more than one town asking for it. Like what we have actually with the housing transfer fee. We have a lot of communities asking for it. So it's harder to put it to bed, you know what I mean, say to turn away from it. I wasn't here 10 years ago, so I don't know what it looked like in terms of the legislation. I can check. I believe that Representative, I believe my predecessor filed it because I remember hearing about it when I was not in office. But I think that there's only one or two other communities that have submitted home rules on this. Northampton is another one. And I think I don't think the legislature has something against immigrants. And I really kind of have to tell you that's not the case. If you look at our legislation that we've passed in the 4 years, it's clear that that's not the case. You know, the Family and Worker Mobility Act, making sure that benefits are in fact enjoyed by immigrants. Like there's a lot we've given tuition now.
Mindy, you're not getting to the point. I'm sorry.
I'm not sorry. You mentioned, does the legislature have something against immigrants? So I'm responding.
I didn't say immigrants. I said non-citizens. Amherst has a huge population of non-citizens who are not, we would not consider them immigrants. They have long-term.
They're permanent residents.
Yes, exactly.
And so my original thing actually is relevant here, though. It takes for something that has policy implications that would ripple through the state. I think it's helpful to connect with other communities that may be feeling the same way. I think it's hard for the legislature to approve, I'll be honest, to approve something that might have great consequence for many communities without hearing from other communities. And so ranked choice voting is actually, I think, suffering from the opposite of that because of the statewide ballot failure. But and I think the housing transfer fee is benefiting from that because it's in the news. We've got a bond and there are lots of communities that want it. But they like to see, even though we think of the home rule has to be something just unique for Amherst, and it is unique for Amherst, if it reverberates outside of Amherst, I think it carries a different political weight. You may not like my answer. I'm just giving you my.
Janet, we have to move on because we have
I'm just
other
going to jump
people
in and
raising their
say,
hands.
I don't know if Mindy was here when we said this, but we're trying to keep individual comments per person for 3 minutes, similar to how the council operates. So I think we'll move on now to Andy Anderson.
Thank you. So I want to start just by repeating that there's two types of revisions or changes to the charter. There are revisions and there are amendments. Amendments can be done by the council. Revisions affect things that, in particular, affect how the council is elected. So I believe 3 of those 5 things are items that would require additional support in order to pass, to be implemented, I should say. And that revisions, and that's either by getting a home rule petition through the legislature or by establishing another charter commission. So the ranked choice voting has been sitting in the legislature for 2 terms now. We are seeing some movement on it. We actually have gotten roughly 8 communities who are in Massachusetts who are requesting this. 6 of those 8, I believe, have been continued until May. So possibly this might get out in May. If it doesn't, then the legislation home rule petition will have to be reintroduced. This term, it was just carried over from the previous term, but my understanding is that that can only be done once. So the council would have to reintroduce that legislation. But the alternative would be, especially since there's 3 of these I see, that we establish in parallel to the advisory charter review committee, a new charter commission that would take on these 3 things and maybe others that are recommended by that review committee and put them before, agree to be the secondary body rather than the legislature to give the authority to have these implemented and then bring them to a vote of the community. And that's what's would be required to get these into the charter. So I hope that's clear. It's either the legislature or the charter commission that's elected by the town public that can approve the implementation of these 3 things. And that commission can then review these 3 things, put them up for a vote before the town, approve them, in other words, for a vote before the town. And then the town can agree to them directly, and that would be enough that's required. So I think that's the path that we have to go forward here, and I hope that the women voters would recommend this as how to move forward on these 3 items.
Thank you, Andy. Rep. Dom, if you want to respond to that, feel free.
If it requires to be, if the bill needs to be refiled next session, I am pleased to be the person and honored by the privilege of chaperoning it and restarting and reconnecting with legislative leaders to convince them and to advocate for its passage. But I also hope that the town of Amherst will look at the town of East Hampton's legislation that was passed and see if it's relevant or what parts of it may be relevant for Amherst, because that has already passed. And that is now allowing ranked choice voting to happen. So sometimes, I just want to say this, sometimes people have said to me, well, if East Hampton can have it, why can't we? And East Hampton's home rule is very different than Amherst. So I think there's a real assessment there to look at, a real comparison.
Could I address that briefly? The East Hampton's measure went through a different committee. It did not get sent to the elections committee. It was sent to the municipal governments committee, which tends to rubber stamp things, is my understanding. They, unless it's clearly a problem, with respect to the Constitution or other state law, they will give deference to the town and pass things through. So that doesn't,
so
hasn't happened.
it'd
They
be
figured this
important,
out.
but it'd be important to see what language was in that bill that allowed it to be steered in that direction legislatively.
I think
Yeah,
it was
thank
just
you.
snuck in, basically.
Michael, do you want to go ahead with your
I want to
question?
make 2 very quick points.
Yeah.
I think Mindy has suggested a way we might go forward in terms of non-citizen voting, and that is to see if we can't find other communities that are impacted by higher education in the way we are, and therefore have a number of non-citizen permanent residents who are non-citizens, and maybe collaborate with them. That might be something the league wants to recommend in this case, that we try to form affiliations, because there are other communities which would probably be facing this. And the other thing I want to say, in terms of ranked choice voting, I'm in favor of it. It's sort of a good thing, but I'm not strongly in favor of it right now, because my fear is that until Amherst's participation in voting is higher, that this might in fact suppress participation, because it's very confusing to people right now, as the state referendum question suggested. So I think we have work to do before that becomes a viable option for Amherst.
Yeah, thank you. Rep. Dom, if you want to respond, if not, I'll take other questions.
I think those are good points, and I think the commission that was set up by the charter recognized the importance of public education and incorporated it into their recommendations, Michael. And they do a great job of doing public education, but it was on, we need to do one on like steroids if we're gonna be pursuing it. I mean,
Yeah.
I personally love their ballots where you have to say, rank your favorite cupcakes or your favorite candy. People get to see it, but it needs to be sort of bigger. And they recognize that. And they said, we need to do that.
Thank you so much. Other questions I'll take? If not, I have one of my own. I guess my question was with the real estate transfer fee, I know it's been brought forward by other municipalities, and in the state governor's proposal for the fee, may I ask, and just purely uneducated on the matter, how what is the percentage that the governor has set it at? I know Amherst has set it at 2.5%. Do you know?
I'm gonna have to get back to you, Julie. It's
Okay.
not just the percentage that she set it at, it's at what level sale she set it at.
Oh, okay.
And that's why Amherst would be not affected by it, because the level of the sale is higher than what the average sale is for here. So one of the efforts that we're trying to do from Western Mass as a delegation is advocate that the level of sale should be set to the specific market in a certain way, so that it's not one entity's market ends up dictating for all the states. So it's not like the Nantucket market should dictate what's going on in like Amherst or Granby, right? I mean, that would be, but that in a sense is what she's doing. So we're looking for it level. There's also, there's differences of opinion, just to sort of be clear about this with the housing transfer fee on where the money should go. So like some communities say it should go right into affordable housing. I believe Senator Comerford's enabling legislation says the money should go to the local housing trusts. Amherst's home rule does not have, it has it going into affordable housing, but also into funds that would deal with infrastructure. With the idea, I think, that when you have more housing, you're going to need you're going to need expanded infrastructure. And it's not clear where the money would go. The most interesting thing, though, for people who are advocating for transfer fees is that, one, the governor included it as a policy matter in the bond. Usually bonds are just about where we're going to spend money. So she incorporated a lot of different housing policies. This was one of them. But the fact that she did that means now we have to discuss it, which is awesome. And so that bond was advanced from the Housing Committee as is, and then it was also advanced from the Bonding Committee as is to House Ways and Means. And so essentially what that means is House Ways and Means is sort of pulling together all the discussions and pros and cons and trying to come up with a House version of the housing bond. And that's what we expect in the House to see sometime before the end of this month.
Great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I think it's personally, as someone who very much supports the real estate transfer fee, I think it's great that it's been proposed, but then also like tying it back to the market sales, or even like, I'd imagine the median income in Nantucket is much higher than the median income in Amherst. So
not necessarily so. The residents of
Really?
Nantucket are not necessarily the home buyers in Nantucket.
Huh. Interesting. I did not know that.
Year-round residents.
One of their big problems on the Martha's Vineyard in the Nantucket is that people who work on the island can't afford to live on the island.
Huh.
And it's a
So
huge
actually
issue.
relatively similar to the issue in Amherst, where people who, that's
It's
interesting.
it's kind of the same. And so in the bond, if I can just take one more
Yeah,
minute,
please.
the governor defined something called seasonal communities, but what she had in mind with seasonal communities was like Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard in terms of like visitors in the summer. And one of the things I've been advocating for is that seasonal communities include the academic season.
Yeah.
Like this influx of people in a community that's around academia, and should also be considered just like, the influx of like New Yorkers to Nantucket is being considered on the summer. We'll see. I mean, so for me, it's like it's a suggestion and it's a proposal and it's a piece of advocacy as a way of me identifying for my colleagues that Amherst has its own set of issues related to being sort of quote unquote college town and how that affects our housing market.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That was a very great and diligent answer. So thank you. Yeah, any other questions before 3 o'clock? We technically have 1 minute, but I'll take other questions if we want. No?
Julian, do
Okay.
you want to show that last slide?
Yeah,
Because I think
sure.
you had an email there.
I think that's perfect. I will share my last slide, which is how to get in touch with us. For anybody who has questions or comments that you haven't shared here, please send them directly to me with the charter line, with the topic line, League of Women Voters of Amherst Charter comment. And I will forward it to our Charter Review Committee, as well as just get back in touch with you to say, hey, we've received this, etc., and answer a question you have if you have any questions. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you all. So please look in your inbox and possibly your mailbox for a review of all of the work that this committee has done. We're hoping for a really strong turnout on June 2nd when we go through all of these suggestions that well, I guess, Darcy, you and your committee are going to sort of narrow down the ones that you want to put forward to the membership. Is that correct?
Yeah. That's unclear as of right now, but we're assuming that some will drop out for one reason or another. Yes.
Okay. All right. So bring your friends onto Zoom, big cup of tea, and we'll get through all of the recommendations that this committee is going to make, and then hopefully we'll have a really good, strong case for the ones that we present going forward with the town town committee that will be discussing these items. So thank you all.